Section 3 of the Conjure Woman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James K. White. Section 3 of the Conjure Woman by Charles Waddell Chesnutt. Ma's Jeems' Nightmare. We found old Julius very useful when we moved to our new residence. He had a thorough knowledge of the neighborhood, was familiar with the roads and the watercourses, knew the qualities of the various soils and what they would produce, and where the best hunting and fishing were to be had. He was a marvelous hand in the management of horses and dogs, with whose mental processes he manifested a greater familiarity than mere use would seem to account for, though it was doubtless due to the simplicity of a life that had kept him close to nature. Toward my tract of land and the things that were on it, the creeks, the swamps, the hills, the meadows, the stones, the trees, he maintained a peculiar personal attitude that might be called predial rather than proprietary. He had been accustomed, until long after middle life, to look upon himself as the property of another. When this relation was no longer possible, owing to the war and to his master's death and the dispersion of the family, he had been unable to break off entirely the mental habits of a lifetime, but had attached himself to the old plantation, of which he seemed to consider himself an appurtenance. We found him useful in many ways and entertaining in others, and my wife and I took quite a fancy to him. Shortly after we became established in our home on the sand hills, Julius brought up to the house one day a colored boy of about 17, whom he introduced as his grandson, and for whom he solicited employment. I was not favorably impressed by the youth's appearance, quite the contrary, in fact. But mainly to please the old man I hired Tom, his name was Tom, to help about the stables, weed the garden, cut wood and bring water, and in general to make himself useful about the outdoor work of the household. My first impression of Tom proved to be correct. He turned out to be very trifling, and I was much annoyed by his laziness, his carelessness, and his apparent lack of any sense of responsibility. I kept him longer than I should, on Julius's account, hoping that he might improve. But he seemed to grow worse instead of better, and when I finally reached the limit of my patience, I discharged him. "I am sorry, Julius," I said to the old man. "I should have liked to oblige you by keeping him, but I can't stand Tom any longer. He is absolutely untrustworthy." "Yes, sah," replied Julius, with a deep sigh and a long shake of the head. "I knows he ain't much account, and dey ain't much dependence to be put on 'im, but I was hopin' dat you mought make some 'lowance for a ignorant young nigger, sah, and give 'im one mo' chance." But I had hardened my heart. I had always been too easily imposed upon, and had suffered too much from this weakness. I determined to be firm as a rock in this instance. "No, Julius," I rejoined decidedly, "it is impossible. I gave him more than a fair trial, and he simply won't do." When my wife and I set out for our drive in the cool of the evening (afternoon is evening in Southern parlance), one of the servants put into the rockaway 2 large earthenware jugs. Our drive was to be down through the swamp to the mineral spring at the foot of the sand hills beyond. The water of this spring was strongly impregnated with sulphur and iron, and, while not particularly agreeable of smell or taste, was used by us in moderation for sanitary reasons. When we reached the spring we found a man engaged in cleaning it out. In answer to an inquiry, he said that if we would wait 5 or 10 minutes his task would be finished, and the spring in such condition that we could fill our jugs. We might have driven on and come back by way of the spring, but there was a bad stretch of road beyond, and we concluded to remain where we were until the spring should be ready. We were in a cool and shady place. It was often necessary to wait a while in North Carolina, and our northern energy had not been entirely proof against the influences of climate and local custom. While we sat there, a man came suddenly around a turn of the road ahead of us. I recognized in him a neighbor with whom I had exchanged formal calls. He was driving a horse, apparently a high-spirited creature, possessing, so far as I could see at a glance, the marks of good temper and good breeding. The gentleman, I had heard it suggested, was slightly deficient in both. The horse was rearing and plunging, and the man was beating him furiously with a buggy whip. When he saw us, he flushed a fiery red, and as he passed, held the reins with one hand, at some risk to his safety, lifted his hat, and bowed somewhat constrainedly as the horse darted by us, still panting and snorting with fear. "He looks as though he were ashamed of himself," I observed. "I'm sure he ought to be," exclaimed my wife indignantly. "I think there is no worse sin, and no more disgraceful thing than cruelty." "I quite agree with you," I assented. "A man w'at 'buses his hoss is gwine be hard on de folks w'at wukes fer 'im," remarked Julius. "Ef young Mistah McLean don't min', he'll have a bad dream one dese yer days, jes' like his gran'daddy had, 'way back yonder, long years befo' de wah." "What was it about Mr. McLean's dream, Julius?" I asked. The man had not yet finished cleaning the spring, and we might as well put in time listening to Julius as in any other way. We had found some of his plantation tales quite interesting. "Mars Jeems McLean," said Julius, "was de gran'daddy of dis yer gentleman w'at is jes' gone by us beatin' his hoss. He had a big plantation and a heap of niggers. Mars Jeems was a hard man, and monst'us stric' wid his hands. Eber sence he growed up, he neber 'peared to have no feelin' fer nobody. W'en his daddy, ole Mars John McLean, died, de plantation and all de niggers fell to young Mars Jeems. He had be'n bad 'nuff befo', but it wa'n't long after'ds 'tel it got so dey wuz no use in libbin' at all ef you had ter lib 'roun' Mars Jeems. His niggers wuz 'bleedzd ter slave fum daylight ter dark, w'iles de yuther folks didn' have ter wuk 'cep'n' fum sun ter sun. En dey didn' git no mo' ter eat dan dey oughter, en dat de co'sest kin'. Dey wa'n't 'lowed ter sing, ner dance, ner play de banjo w'en Mars Jeems wuz 'roun' de place, fer Mars Jeems say he wouldn' have no sech gwines on, said he bought his hands ter wuk, en not ter play. En w'en night come, dey mus' sleep en res', so dey'd be ready ter git up soon in de mawnin' en go ter wuk fresh en strong. Mars Jeems didn' 'low no co'tin' er junesin' 'roun' his plantation, said he wanted his niggers ter put dey min's on dey wuk, en not be wastin' dey time wid no sech foolishness. En he wouldn' let his hands git mad, said he wa'n't raisin' niggers, but wuz raisin' cotton. En w'eneber any er de boys en gals had 'mence' ter git sweet on one anudder, he'd sell one er de udder un 'em, er sen' 'em 'way down in Robeson County ter his udder plantation, whar dey couldn' neber see one anudder. Ef any er de niggers eber complained, dey got 40, so co'se dey didn' many un 'em complain. But dey didn' lack it, des de same, en nobody couldn' blame 'em, fer dey had a hard time. Mars Jeems didn' make no 'lowance fer nat'ral bawn laziness, ner sickness, ner trouble in de min', ner nuffin. He wuz des gwine git so much wuk out er eve'y han', er know de reason why. Dey wuz one time de niggers 'lowed fer a spell dat Mars Jeems might git better. He tuk a likin' ter Mars Marrabo McSwain's oldest gal, Miss Libbie, en useter go ober dere eve'y day er eve'y evenin', en folks said dey wuz gwine git married sho'. But it 'pears dat Miss Libbie heard 'bout de gwines on Mars Jeems' plantation, en she des 'lowed she couldn' trus' herse'f wid no sech a man; dat he might git so use' ter 'busin' his niggers dat he'd 'mence ter 'buse his wife atter he got use' ter havin' her roun' de house. So she declared she wa'n't gwine have nuffin mo' ter do wid young Mars Jeems. De niggers wuz all monst'us sorry w'en de match wuz bus' up, fer now Mars Jeems got wusser'n he wuz befo' he sta'ted sweetheartin'. De time he useter spen' co'tin' Miss Libbie he put in findin' fault wid de niggers, en all his bad feelin's 'cause Miss Libbie throwed him ober, he 'peared ter try ter wuk off on de po' niggers. Whilst Mars Jeems was courting Miss Libby, two of the hands on the plantation had got to setting a heap of store by one another. One of 'em was named Solomon, and the other was a woman what worked in the field longer'n I am. I forget that woman's name, but it don't 'mount to much in the tale nohow. Now whether cause Mars Jeems was so tuck up with his own Junesy sweetheart, that it didn't pay no 'tention for a while to what was going on 'twixt Solomon and his Junesy, or whether his own courtin' made him kinder easy on the courtin' in the quarters, dey ain't no tellin'. But dey's one thing sho', dat w'en Miss Libby throwed him over, he found out about Solomon and the gal monst'us quick, en gunned Solomon 40, en sont the gal down to the Robeson County plantation en told all the niggers ef he ketch 'em at any mo' such foolishness, he was gwine ter skin 'em alive en tan dey hides befo' dey ve'y eyes. Co'se he wouldn't 'a' done it, but it might 'a' made things wusser'n dey wuz. So you kin 'magine dey wa'n't much love makin' in the quarters fer a long time. Mars Jeems used ter go down to the other plantations sometimes fer a week er mo', en so he had to hire a oberseer ter look atter his work w'ile he 'uz gone. Mars Jeems' oberseer was a po' w'ite man name' Nick Johnson. The niggers called 'im Mars Johnson ter his face, but behin' his back dey used ter call 'im Ole Nick, en the name suited 'im ter a T. He was wusser'n Mars Jeems ever dared ter be. Co'se the darkies didn' like de way Mars Jeems use' 'em, but he was de marster, en had a right ter do ez he please'. But dis yer Ole Nick wa'n't nuffin but a po' buckra, en all de niggers 'spised 'im ez much ez dey hated 'im, fer he didn't own nobody, en wa'n't no better 'n a nigger, fer in dem days any 'spectable pusson would ruther be a nigger dan a po' w'ite man. Now atter Solomon's gal had be'n sont away, he kep' feelin' mo' en mo' bad erbout it, 'tel fin'lly he 'lowed he wuz gwine ter see ef dey couldn't be sump'n done fer ter git her back, en ter make Mars Jeems treat de darkies better. So he tuk a peck er cotton out de barn one night en went ober ter see ole Aun' Peggy, de free nigger 'Cajun 'oman down by de Wilmington Road. Aun' Peggy listened to his tale, en ax' him some questions, en den tol' him she would wuk her roots en see w'at dey'd say 'bout it, en termorrer night he should come back ag'in en fetch anudder peck er co'n, en den she'd hab sump'n fer ter tell 'im. So Solomon went back de nex' night, en sho' 'nuff Aun' Peggy tol' 'im w'at ter do. She gun 'im some stuff w'at look like it be'n made by poundin' up some roots en yerbs wid a pestle en a mortar. "Dis yer stuff," sez she, "is monst'us powerful kinder goopher. You take dis home en gin it ter de cook, ef you kin trus' her, en tell her fer ter put it in yo' marster's soup de fus' cloudy day he have okra soup fer dinner. Min' you follow de directions. It ain't gwine ter poison 'em, is it?" Solomon gittin' kinder scared, fer Solomon wuz a good man, en didn' want ter do nobody no real harm. "Oh, no," sez ole Aun' Peggy, "it's gwine ter do 'im good, but he'll have a monst'us bad dream fus'. A month fum now you come down here en lemme know how de goopher is wukkin', fer I ain' done much er dis kinder conjurin' er late years, en I has ter kinder keep track on it ter see dat it don't 'complish no more'n I 'lows fer it ter do. En I has ter be kinder keerful 'bout conjurin' w'ite folks, so be sho' en lemme know w'ateber you do, des w'at is gwine on roun' de plantation." So Solomon say all right, en tuk de goopher mixtry up ter de big house, en gun it ter de cook, en tol' her fer ter put it in Mars Jeems' soup de fus' cloudy day she have okra soup fer dinner. It happen' dat de ve'y nex' day wuz a cloudy day, en so de cook made okra soup fer Mars Jeems' dinner, en put de powder Solomon gun her inter de soup, en made de soup rale good, so Mars Jeems eat a whole lot of it en 'peared ter enjoy it. De nex' mawnin' Mars Jeems tol' de oberseer he wuz gwine away on some business, en den he wuz gwine to his other plantation down in Robeson County, en he didn' expec' he'd be back fer a mont' er so. "But," sez he, "I want you ter run dis yer plantation fer all it's wuth. Dese yer niggers is gittin' monst'us triflin' en lazy en keerless, en dey ain' no dependence ter be put in 'em. I wants dat stop, en w'iles I'm gone away I wants de 'spenses cut way down en a heap mo' wuk done. Fac', I want dis yer plantation ter make a record dat'll show w'at kinder oberseer you is." Old Nick didn't say nuffin but "Yes, suh," but de way he kinder grinned to hisse'f en show his big yaller teef en snap de rawhide he use' ter kyar roun' wid 'im, made cole chills run up en down de backbone er dem niggers w'at heared Mars Jeems a talkin'. En dat night dey wuz moanin' en groanin' down in de quarters, fer de niggers all knowed w'at wuz comin'. So, sho' 'nuff, Mars Jeems went away nex' mawnin', en de trouble begun. Mars Johnson sta'ted off de ve'y fus' day fer ter see w'at he could have ter show Mars Jeems w'en he come back. He made de tasks bigger en de rashuns littler, en w'en de niggers had wuked all day, he'd fin' sump'n fer ter do roun' de barn somewheres atter dark, fer ter keep 'em busy a hour er so befo' dey went ter sleep. 'Bout 3 or 4 days atter Mars Jeems went away, young Mars Duncan McSwain rode up to de big house one day wid a nigger settin' behin' 'im in de buggy, tied to de seat, en ax' ef Mars Jeems wuz home. Mars Johnson wuz at de house, en he say no. "Well," says Mars Duncan, sezee, "I fotch' dis nigger ober ter Mr. McLean fer ter pay a bet I made wid 'im las' week w'en we wuz playin' kyards tergedder. I bet 'im a nigger man, en here's one I reckon 'll fill de bill. He wuz tuk up de yuther day fer a stray nigger, en he couldn't give no 'count er hisse'f, en so he wuz sol' at auction, en I bought 'im. He's kinder brash, but I knows yo' powers, Mr. Johnson, en I reckon ef anybody kin make 'im toe de mark, you is de man." Mars Johnson grinned one er dem grins w'at show all his snagger teef, en make de niggers 'low he look like de ole Deborah, en sez he ter Mars Duncan, "I reckon you kin trus' me, Mr. Duncan, fer ter tame any nigger wuz ever bawn. De nigger don't live w'at I can't take down in 'bout 4 days." Well, ole Nick had his hands full 'long er dat noo nigger, en w'iles de rest er de darkies wuz sorry fer de po' man, dey 'lowed he kep' Mars Johnson so busy dat dey got along better dan dey'd 'a' done ef de noo nigger had nebber come. De fus thing dat happen', Mars Johnson says ter dis yer noo man, "W'at's yo' name, Sambo?" "My name ain' Sambo," 'spon' de noo nigger. "Did I ax you w'at yo' name wasn't?" says Mars Johnson. "You wants ter be particular how you talks ter me. Now w'at is yo' name, en whar did you come fum?" "I don't know my name," says the nigger, "en I don't 'member whar I come fum. My head is all kinder mix' up." "Yas," says Mars Johnson, "I reckon I'll ha' ter give you sump'n fer ter clar yo' head. At de same time it'll l'arn you some manners, en atter dis, maybe you'll say 'suh' w'en you speaks ter me." Well, Mars Johnson haul off wid his rawhide, en hit de noo nigger once. De noo man look' at Mars Johnson fer a minute ez ef he didn' know w'at ter make er dis yer kinder l'arnin'. But w'en de oberseah raise' his whip ter hit 'im ag'in, de noo nigger des haul off en made fer Mars Johnson, en ef some er de yuther niggers hadn' stop' 'im, it 'pears ez ef it mought 'a' made it warm fer ole Nick dere fer a w'ile. But de oberseah made de yuther niggers he'p tie de noo nigger up, en den gun 'im 40, wid a dozen er so throwed in fer good measure, fer ole Nick wuz nebber stingy wid dem kinder rashuns. De nigger went on at a tarrible rate, des like a wil' man, but co'se he wuz bleedst ter take his medicine, fer he wuz tied up en couldn't he'p hisse'f. Mars Johnson locked de noo nigger up in de barn, en didn' give 'im nuffin ter eat fer a day er so, 'tel he got 'im kinder quiet down, en den he tu'nt 'im loose en put 'im ter wuk. De nigger 'lowed he wa'n't use' ter wukkin', en wouldn't wuk, en Mars Johnson gun 'im anudder 40 fer laziness en impidence, en let 'im fas' a day er so mo', en den put 'im ter wuk ag'in. De nigger went ter wuk, but didn' 'pear ter know how ter handle a hoe. It tuk des 'bout half de oberseah's time lookin' atter 'im, en dat po' nigger got mo' lashin's en cussin's en cuffin's dan any 4 others on de plantation. He didn' mix wid ner talk much ter de res' er de niggers, en couldn't 'pear ter git it thoo his min' dat he wuz a slave, en had ter wuk en min' de w'ite folks, spite er de fac' dat ole Nick gun 'im a lesson eve'y day. En fin'ly Mars Johnson 'lowed dat he couldn't do nuffin wid 'im, dat ef he wuz his nigger, he'd break his spe't er break his neck, one er de yuther. But co'se he wuz only sont ober on trial, en ez he didn' give satisfaction, and he hadn't heard from Mars Jeems 'bout when he was comin' back, and as he was feared he'd get mad some time or 'nother and kill a nigger before he knowed it, he 'lowed he'd better send him back where he come from. So he tied him up and sot him back to Mars Duncan. Now, Mars Duncan McSwain was one of these here easy goin' gentlemen what didn't like to hate no trouble with niggers or nobody else, and he knowed if Mars old Nick couldn't get along with his nigger, nobody could. So he took the nigger to town that same day and sold him to a trader what was getting up a gang of likely niggers for to ship off on the steamboat to go down the river to Wimbledon, and from there to New Orleans. The next day, after the new man had been sent away, Solomon was working in the cotton field, and when he got to the fence next to the woods, at the end of the row, who should he see on the other side but old Aunt Peggy. She beckoned to him, the overseer was down on the other side of the field, and says she, "Why ain't you done come and 'ported to me like I told you?" "Why, law, Aunt Peggy," says Solomon, "dey ain't nuffin to 'port. Mars Jeems went away day atter we gun 'im the goopher mixtry, and we ain't seen hide ner hair on 'im sence. En co'se we don't know nuffin 'bout w'at 'fect it had on 'im. I don't care nuffin 'bout yo' Mars Jeems now. W'at I wants to know is w'at has be'n gwine on 'mongs' de niggers. Has you be'n gittin' 'long any better on de plantation?" "No, Aunt Peggy, we be'n gittin' 'long wusser. Mars Johnson is stric'er 'n he eber wuz befo', en de po' niggers don't hardly get time to draw dey breff, en dey 'lows dey might des ez well be dead ez alive." "Uh-huh," says Aunt Peggy, says she. "I tole you dat is monst'us powerful goopher, en its wuk don't 'pear all at once. Long ez we had dat new nigger here," Solomon went on, "he kep' Mars Johnson busy part de time, but now he's gone away, I s'pose de res' un us'll ketch it wusser'n eber." "W'at's gone wid de new nigger?" says Aunt Peggy, rale quick, battin' her eyes en straightening up. "Ole Nick done sont 'im back ter Mars Duncan, who had fotch 'im here fer ter pay a gamblin' debt ter Mars Jeems," says Solomon, "en I hear Mars Duncan has sol' 'im to a nigger trader up in Patesville, w'at's gwine ter ship 'im off wid a gang termorrer." Ole Aunt Peggy 'peared ter get rale stirred up w'en Solomon tole her dat, en says she, shaking her stick at him, "Why didn't you come en tell me 'bout dis new nigger bein' sol' away? Didn't you promise me ef I give you dat goopher, you'd come en 'pote ter me 'bout all w'at's gwine on dis plantation? Co'se I could 'a' foun' out fer myse'f, but I 'pended on yo' tellin' me, en now by not doin' it I's feared you gwine spile my conjurin'. You come down ter my house ter night en do w'at I tells you, or I'll put a spell on you dat'll make yo' hair fall out so you'll be bal', en yo' eyes drap out so you can't see, en yo' teef fall out so you can't eat, en yo' years grow up so you can't hear. W'en you is foolin' wid a conjure woman like me, you gotter min' yo' P's en Q's, er dere'll be trouble sho' 'nuff." So, co'se, Solomon went down to Aunt Peggy's dat night, en she gun 'im a roasted sweet'n' tater. "You take dis yer sweet'n' tater," says she, "I done goophered it speshly fer dat nigger, so you bet not eat it yo'self or you'll wush you hadn't. En slip off ter town en fin' dat strange man en give 'im dis yer sweet'n' tater. He mus' eat it befo' mornin' sho', ef he don't wanter be sol' away ter New Orleans." "But s'posen de patty rollers ketch me, Aunt Peggy, w'at I gwine ter do?" says Solomon. "De patty rollers ain' gwine tech you, but ef you don't fin' dat nigger I'm gwine git you, en you'll fin' me wusser'n de patty rollers. Des hol' on a minute, en I'll sprinkle you wid some er dis mixtry out'n dis yer bottle, so de patty rollers can't see you, en you kin rub yo' feet wid some er dis yer grease out'n dis gourd, so you kin run fas', en rub some on it in yo' eyes so you kin see in de dark. En den you mus' fin' dat new nigger en give 'im dis yer tater, er you're gwine ter hab mo' trouble on yo' hands dan you eber had befo' in yo' life, or eber will hab sence." So Solomon tuk de sweet'n' tater en sta'ted up de road fas' ez he could go, en befo' long he retch town. He went right along by de patty rollers, en dey didn' 'pear ter notice 'im, en bimeby he foun' whar de strange nigger was kep', en he walk' right pas' de guard at de do' en foun' 'im. De nigger couldn't see him, of course, and he couldn't 'a' seen de nigger in de dark ef it hadn't be'n fer de stuff Aun' Peggy gun 'im ter rub on his eyes. De nigger was layin' in a cornder, 'sleep, en Solomon des slip' up to 'im, en hilt dat sweet'n' 'tater 'fo' de nigger's nose, en he des nat'ally retch up wid his han' en tuk de 'tater en eat it in his sleep widout knowin' it. W'en Solomon seed he done eat de 'tater, he went back en tole Aun' Peggy, en den went home to his cabin ter sleep, way 'long 'bout 2 o'clock in de mawnin'. De nex' day wuz Sunday, en so de niggers had a little time ter deyselves. Solomon was kinder 'sturb' in his min' thinkin' 'bout his junesey w'at 'uz gone away, en wonderin' w'at Aun' Peggy had ter do wid dat noo nigger, en he had sa'ntered up in de woods so's ter be by hisse'f a little, en at de same time ter look at de rabbit trap he'd sot down in de edge er de swamp, w'en who should he see standin' under a tree but a w'ite man. Solomon didn't know de w'ite man at fus', till de w'ite man spoke up to 'im. "Is dat you, Solomon?" sezee. Den Solomon recognized de voice. "Fer de Lawd's sake, Mars Jeems, is dat you?" "Yes, Solomon," sez his marster, "dis is me, er w'at's lef' er me." It wa'n't no wonder Solomon hadn't knowed Mars Jeems at fus', fer he wuz dress' like a po' w'ite man, en wuz barefooted, en look monst'us pale en peaked, ez ef he'd des come th'ough a hard spell er sickness. "You er lookin' kinder po'ly, Mars Jeems," sez Solomon. "Is you be'n sick, suh?" "No, Solomon," sez Mars Jeems, shakin' his head en speakin' sorter slow en sad, "I ain' be'n sick, but I's had a monst'us bad dream. Fac', a reg'lar natchul nightmare. But tell me how things has be'n gwine up ter de plantation sence I be'n gone, Solomon." So Solomon up en tole 'im 'bout de crops, en 'bout de hosses en de mules, en 'bout de cows en de hogs, en w'en he 'mence' ter tell 'im 'bout de noo nigger, Mars Jeems prick up his years en lis'n, en eve'y now en den he say, "Uh-huh, mhm," en nod his head, en bimeby, w'en he'd ax Solomon some mo' questions, he sezee, "Now, Solomon, I don't want you ter say a word ter nobody 'bout meetin' me here, but I want you ter slip up ter de house en fetch me some clothes en some shoes. I fergot ter tell you dat a man rob me back yonder on de road en swap' clothes wid me widout axin' me whether er no. But you neenter say nuffin 'bout dat nuther. You go en fetch me some clothes heah, so nobody won't see you, en keep yo' mouf shet, en I'll give you $1." Solomon was so 'stonish' he lack ter fell ober in his tracks w'en Mars Jeems promise' ter give 'im $1. Dey su't'nly wuz a change come ober Mars Jeems w'en he offer one of his niggers dat much money. Solomon 'mence' ter 'spec' dat Aun' Peggy's cunj'ation had be'n wukkin' monst'us strong. Solomon fotch Mars Jeems some clothes en shoes, en dat same ebenin' Mars Jeems 'peared at de house en let on lack he des dat minute got home from Robeson County. Mars Johnson was all ready ter talk ter 'im, but Mars Jeems sont 'im word he wa'n't feelin' ve'y well dat night, en he'd see 'im de morrer. So nex' mawnin', atter breakfus', Mars Jeems sont fer de oberseer, en ax' 'im fer ter give 'count er his stewardship. Ole Nick tole Mars Jeems how much wuk be'n done, en got de books en showed 'im how much money be'n save'. Den Mars Jeems ax' 'im how de darkies be'n behavin', en Mars Johnson say dey be'n behavin' good, most of 'em, en dem w'at didn' behave good at fus' change' dey conduc' atter he got holt of 'em a time er two. "All," sezee, "'cep'n' de noo nigger Mr. Duncan fotch ober here en lef' on trial w'iles you wuz gone." "Ah, yas," 'lows Mars Jeems. "Tell me all 'bout dat noo nigger. I heared a little 'bout dat quare noo nigger las' night, en it wuz des too ridic'lous. Tell me all 'bout dat noo nigger." So, seein' Mars Jeems so good natured 'bout it, Mars Johnson up en tole 'im how he tied up de noo han' de fus' day, en gun 'im 40 'ca'se he wouldn' tell 'im his name. "Ha, ha, ha!" sez Mars Jeems, laffin' fit ter kill, "but dat is too funny fer any use. Tell me some mo' 'bout dat noo nigger." So Mars Johnson went on en tole 'im how he had ter starbe de noo nigger 'fo' he could make 'im take holt er a hoe. "Dat wuz de beatenis' notion fer a nigger," sez Mars Jeems, puttin' on airs des lack he wuz a w'ite man, and I reckon you didn't do nuffin to him.' 'Oh, no, suh,' says the overseer, grinning like a cheesy cat. 'I didn't do nuffin but take de hide off'n 'im.' Mars Jeems laughed and laughed, till it 'peared like he was gwine ter bus'. 'Tell me some mo' 'bout dat noo nigger, oh, tell me some mo'. Dat noo nigger int'rests me, he do, en dat is a fac'.' Mars Johnson didn't quite understan' why Mars Jeems should make such a great 'miration 'bout de noo nigger, but co'se he want ter please de gentleman w'at hired 'im, en so he 'splain all about how many times he had to cowhide de noo nigger, en how he made 'im do tasks twice ez big ez some er de other hands, en how he'd chain 'im up in de barn at night en feed 'im on corn bread en water. 'Oh, but you was a monst'us good oberseer, you was de bes' oberseer in dis county, Mistah Johnson,' says Mars Jeems, w'en de oberseer got th'oo wid his tale, 'en dey ain' neber be'n no nigger breaker like you roun' here befo'. En you deserbs great credit fer sendin' dat nigger 'way befo' you spilt 'im fer de market. Fac', you is such a monst'us good oberseer, en you is got dis yer plantation in such fine shape dat I reckon I don't need you no mo'. You is got dese yer darkies so well train' dat I 'spec' I kin run 'em myse'f fum dis time on. But I does wish you had 'a hilt on ter dat noo nigger 'tel I got home, fer I'd 'a like ter seed 'im, I cert'nly should.' De oberseer was so 'stonish' he didn' ha'dly know w'at ter say, but fin'lly he ax' Mars Jeems ef he wouldn' give 'im a recommend fer ter git 'im anudder place. 'No, suh,' says Mars Jeems, 'somehow er 'nother I don't like yo' looks sence I come back dis time, en I'd much ruther you wouldn' stay roun' here. Fac', I's feared ef I'd meet you 'lone in de woods sometime I mought wanter harm you. But layin' dat aside, I be'n lookin' ober dese yer books er yo'n w'at you kep' w'ile I wuz away, en fer a year er so back, en dere's some figgers w'at ain' des clear ter me. I ain' got no time fer ter talk erbout 'em now, but I 'spec' befo' I settles wid you fer dis las' mont', you better come up here termorrer, atter I's looked de books en counts ober some mo', en den we'll straighten our business all up.' Mars Jeems 'lowed atterwards dat he wuz des shootin' in de dark w'en he said dat 'bout de books, but howsomeber, Mars Nick Johnson lep dat neighborhood 'twix' de nex' 2 suns, en nobody roun' here neber seed hidin' a hair of 'im sence. En all de darkies thank' de Lawd en 'lowed it wuz a good riddance er bad rubbage. But all dem things I done tol' you ain' nuffin 'cidin' de change w'at come ober Mars Jeems fum dat time on. Aun' Peggy's goopher had made a new man of 'im enti'ely. De nex' day atter he come back, he tol' de hands dey neenter ter work only fum sun ter sun, en he cut dey tasks down so dey didn' nobody have ter stan' ober 'em wid a rawhide er a hickory. En he 'lowed ef de niggers wanter hab a dance in de big barn any Sad'day night, dey mought hab it. En bimeby, w'en Solomon seed how good Mars Jeems wuz, he ax' 'im ef he wouldn' please sen' down ter de udder plantation fer his junesey. Mars Jeems say suttinly, en gun Solomon a pass en a note ter de oberseer on de udder plantation, en sont Solomon down ter Robeson County wid a hoss en buggy fer ter fetch his junesey back. W'en de niggers see how fine Mars Jeems gwine treat 'em, dey all tuk ter sweetheartin' en juneseyin' en singin' en dancin', en 8 er 10 couples got married, en bimeby eve'ybody 'mence ter say Mars Jeems McLean got a finer plantation en slicker lookin' niggers, en dat he 'uz makin' mo' cotton en corn dan any other gentleman in de county. En Mars Jeems' own junesey, Miss Libbie, heard 'bout de new gwines on Mars Jeems' plantation, en she change' her min' 'bout Mars Jeems, en tuk 'im back ag'in, en 'fo' long dey had a fine weddin', en all de darkies had a big feas', en dey wuz fiddlin' en dancin' en funnin' en frolickin' fum sundown ter mawnin'." "And they all lived happy ever after," I said, as the old man reached a full stop. "Yas, suh," he said, interpreting my remarks as a question, "they did. Solomon useter say," he added, "dat Aun' Peggy's goopher had turnt Mars Jeems to a nigger, en dat noo han' wuz Mars Jeems hisse'f. But co'se Solomon didn' das ter let on 'bout w'at he 'spicioned, en ole Aun' Peggy would 'a' 'nied it ef she had be'n axed, fer she'd 'a' got in trouble sho' ef it 'uz knowed she'd be'n conjurin' de w'ite folks. Dis yer tale goes ter show," concluded Julius sententiously, as the man came up and announced that the spring was ready for us to get water, "dat w'ite folks w'at is so hard en stric' en don't make no 'lowance fer po' ign'ant niggers w'at ain' had no chance ter l'arn is liable ter have bad dreams, ter say de leas', en dat dem w'at is kin' en good ter po' people is sho' ter prosper en git 'long in de worl'." "That is a very strange story, Uncle Julius," observed my wife, smiling, "and Solomon's explanation is quite improbable." "Yes, Julius," said I, "that was powerful goopher. I am glad, too, that you told us the moral of the story. It might have escaped us otherwise. By the way, did you make that up all by yourself?" The old man's face assumed an injured look, expressive more of sorrow than of anger, and shaking his head, he replied, "No, suh, I heared dat tale befo' you er Miss Annie dere wuz bawn, suh. My mammy tole me dat tale w'en I wa'n't mo' d'n knee high to a hoppergrass." I drove to town next morning on some business, and did not return until noon, and after dinner I had to visit a neighbor, and did not get back until supper time. I was smoking a cigar on the back piazza in the early evening, when I saw a familiar figure carrying a bucket of water to the barn. I called my wife. "My dear," I said severely, "what is that rascal doing here? I thought I discharged him yesterday for good and all." "Oh yes," she answered, "I forgot to tell you. He was hanging round the place all the morning, and looking so down in the mouth, that I told him that if he would try to do better, we would give him one more chance. He seemed so grateful and so really in earnest in his promises of amendment, that I'm sure you'll not regret taking him back." I was seriously enough annoyed to let my cigar go out. I did not share my wife's rose colored hopes in regard to Tom, but as I did not wish the servants to think there was any conflict of authority in the household, I let the boy stay. End of Mars Jeems' Nightmare. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista.